All right. Welcome to another episode of the Doomer Optimism podcast. Uh, my name's Donald. I'm an occasional first-time host, and I'm joined by Ashley Colby and co-hosting, and we're interviewing today Clare Coffey, who is a writer who lives in Idaho. She is not based in Idaho, but she lives in Idaho. So that's her author bio. And I appreciated that she said she lived there and it's not based there. I was thinking yesterday the whole based somewhere. It's like military speak almost. Uh, and it's a rainy day in the Pacific Northwest. Uh, my carrots are starting to come up and the garlic's looking good. And we're here to talk about a trio of articles that Claire wrote for the New Atlantis about uh living without a car and traveling without a phone, and then how to make friends. And the three complement each other quite nicely. So Claire, could you introduce yourself? But you and I met, I don't know, some years ago in West Philadelphia. I think you're from Philadelphia, but you live in
Yes.
Idaho now. So to the
Yes.
extent that you,
I'm
you don't
based in
have,
Philadelphia,
you're
but I
based
live in
in Philadelphia,
Idaho.
but you live in Idaho. Very good. So you don't have to, you can only give as much life story as you want to, but maybe you could connect the dots a little bit um for us and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. As noted, I am Clare Coffey. I from Philadelphia originally. I moved out to Idaho, I want to say 2017. Um, I actually spent 2020 in Tbilisi, Georgia. Um, so I lived there for a year and then I came back to Idaho. Um, Mostly because it's one of those funny situations where it's actually cheaper to buy a house in Philly than it is here in Idaho, or at least my part of Idaho, but it's more expensive to rent. So this is a good place to rent, a bad place to buy. So eventually the dream was to make the long awaited homecoming, pomp and splendor in buy my house. I have seven brothers and sisters. And a bunch of cousins, most of whom are in that area. So I can't really imagine um, permanently settling anywhere else. But that's the dream, to get back to the big city, out of this country life, like the opposite of a Hallmark Christmas movie.
And what kind of family do you come from that you have such a big family?
Catholic. They always say it's like west of the Rockies you're Mormon, east of the Rockies you're Catholic. If you've got that many kids.
Great. So I don't know, we could get started talking a little bit, or maybe you could describe a little bit this trio of articles, which I agree went
Also,
together
could we
super.
pause for a second?
Yeah.
Moscow, or excuse me, Idaho, because the rent is cheap. Anyway,
Yes.
that's amazing. Why not?
I mean, that's not how I ended up here, but I ended
Okay.
up here due to a very bad relation to decision that I stayed because the rent is cheap.
Okay.
Okay.
And I
Yeah,
mean,
so
Idaho is beautiful. It's an interesting place, very far from Philadelphia. Okay, carry on.
um so yeah, I mean, I guess this trio of articles are really I think kind of a part fitting for our podcast, which is called Doomer Optimism, and it's just sort of like a lot of the themes we explore are like these sort of mundane ways in which you can, I don't know, rediscover meaning in what feels like a kind of alienating or sometimes sometimes just sterile world. And so the joy of losing your phone, driven apart, and how to make friends, for me the theme is kind of finding different ways to subvert these assumptions about what kind of technologies we use in order to like regain some of that spontaneity. But one thing before we get started, I have to read one particular line from one of your articles because it made me laugh out loud. Gen Z is at risk of stalling out in the immortal words of Clueless, a bunch of virgins who can't drive. I laughed so hard at that. And I just want to congratulate you for being such a clear writer and very funny and making your thesis without being like so opaque, which I feel like a lot of writers nowadays are just like lean into being opaque to be able to make their point. But your point is very clear and it's very good and interesting. So anyways, yeah, let's talk about these 3 articles.
Can we start with the how to make friends one?
Okay.
Is that okay? I really appreciated this article. You start off giving the kind of standard litany. Americans are lonely, bowling alone, so on. We're like, okay, all of that is true, but you can't sit around in your house waiting for the complete transformation of American culture or something like that. That would be nice if it happened, but in the meantime, you got to go out. So what was the impetus for writing this? And then maybe you can tell our listeners, we'll link to the article, but you can tell them how to make friends. Because I imagine, most podcast listeners are desperately in need of that advice.
Yeah, sure. The impetus for the article, I think it started because it started because the day after I lost my phone, I sat down, started like writing a funny account of it. And when I got back, I sent it off to editor of the New Atlantis, Ari Schulman, who's a wonderful editor. And he said, "We'll take it. And why don't you actually expand this and write a couple more, like more of your virtue of necessity, turning your bad habits of losing things and failing driver's licensing exams into a sort of alternate ways of looking at the world essays." So we eventually just kind of played around with different ideas and settled on this kind of 3-part thing. And I think the we were trying to close it with something that was sort of positive, or something you could act on. And so I just sort of sat down and tried to think about the places where I've lived and what I've been lucky enough to always make friends easily, and thinking about what conditions sort of helped foster that. How would I go about reverse engineering it if I were like trying to explain it to someone with a kind of a different temperament, and to also try to disentangle what parts of it are things you can do and what parts of it are just not in your control. And that's how that essay came to be.
So one of the themes that keeps coming up in Doomer Optimism is this theme of like, well, the system is so messed up, I can't even really do anything unless my efforts should be focused on like changing the system itself. And then another theme that comes up socially a lot is a lot of people ask like, well, how do I find people who are like-minded to me? It's so hard for me to make a community because I just need to find like-minded individuals. And in your article, you said, don't assume you can only be friends with people like you, whether this is age, sex, occupation, or politics. You can make friends with disabled veterans or widowed grandmothers and college students. You'll find what they offer cannot be predicted. And so I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit. I think I share your enthusiasm for friendship with people who are different. And in fact, I feel like it's kind of the basis for all functioning society. So I don't know, maybe you could expand on that line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most obvious one, the one that gets sort of the most airtime, is making social bonds across political lines. But I think in many ways you're really for a lot of our lives kind of shuffled into sort of age and class segregated venues. You go to school with people of your own age, probably of a certain demographic profile, and then you do that and you get your job, and where you work is going to be another little funnel. And my best friend in town, she's just one of the best friends of my life, is 67. She's just the most incredible woman. I'm so lucky to know her, and I wouldn't have ever met her in any sort of looking for people like me, because she's not like me. She's older. She's had a different life. We probably disagree about most things politically. And yeah, if I had not just been hanging out constantly at her little cafe and just made friends with her there, I would never have met her, and she would never have brought this wonderful richness to my life that she has.
I have to tell a story about a neighbor I met, because I feel like these stories are much more useful sometimes than talking in the abstract. Here, when I moved to Uruguay, I met this older expat couple, gay couple, Patrick McDonnell and Christopher Swain, British and Irish. And Patrick had this crazy life. Like, he was involved in, he was jailed for conspiracy. He was trying to pass LSD to the US nuclear submarine operators with the theory that they would not press the button if they had taken LSD before. And he was like part of a group in the 60s that like went off to Scotland and like were synthesizing LSD on these like types of wheat that would not necessarily get moldy in that part of Scotland. And so the farmers were like, why are you growing that type of wheat? Like, we know that gets moldy. Like, they knew they were up to something. And there was like a chemist in their group, and they were synthesizing LSD. And he was like kind of friends with Princess Anne for a while. And he would have these long parties that were like, I had to like get everybody to go to Stonehenge just to leave my house. Like let's go trip at Stonehenge or whatever. Anyways, he was just such a cool guy. He had a story about going to South Africa and taking the like mixed race elevator, and then he got kicked out of South Africa forever for not taking the white elevator. Anyways, it was such a cool person to meet. And it was just because of like happenstance that we were at this same part of the world at the same time, English speakers. And so it was weird to think that he was my friend, but it was like such a wonderful and rich friendship. And so yeah, I mean, that kind of thing, it's kind of impossible. And I also think about dating apps where people are like, I will only talk to somebody with above this height or whatever, and kind of precluding anyone, like any kind of spontaneity. Or
and it used to,
no
like,
idea.
used to emerge from proximity a lot more. You'd play with the kids who lived around your house, and it wasn't based on shared activities or more formally organized things.
Or like parents kind of matchmaking via play dates.
Yep.
Yeah, the dating apps is a crazy one, because I don't know how I would possibly make a decision under those. I feel like I'd just be like, all right, anybody who wants to come meet me, come have a drink. I'll be here from this to this time on Fridays. You may come to my office hours and see if I can't imagine like looking at a picture and seeing like, okay, age 26, 5 miles away, and thinking yes or no. I feel like I understand why people make crazy like heuristics in that circumstance, because I don't know how you would possibly, like, the only situation I can imagine that being useful for is like if you can just filter for like wants kids, is Catholic, wants to leave hometown, wants to stay in hometown.
Right.
But you can't even like, you don't even filter for the actual important on paper things. So you just get absolutely nothing of value and endless decision making. I find them fascinating, but
now there's all the niche ones. There are like the Catholic dating app, the Jewish dating app. I guess like
Yeah, that's where the crazy people go in every religion.
yeah, exactly.
Or maybe not. I feel like in like 2011, it was called Catholic Match, and it was just all weirdos. But I got on it, so who's the weirdo now?
So your first suggestion for people to make friends is to become a regular. Develop a routine around the same physical places as much as you can. And it brought to mind when we moved to Northwest Washington when my daughter was 1 year old. And having a small child makes a lot of the things you described much easier because we just went to the same playground that was near our house all the
Mhm.
time. And that's how we met basically everyone we know. Was like, oh, we've seen you. You kind of like you see someone 3 or 4 times. Oh, your kid's about the same age as my kid. You seem nice. Let's trade numbers. And then you just end up seeing people over and over and over again.
Right.
Uh, and the nice thing when you have a little kid is that you can get to know someone very well quickly, but it removes some of the pressure of that because you're getting your kids together, you're not getting together, but it's actually for the parents, not anyway. It creates a social situation which is much easier to spend a lot of time with someone relatively quickly, which is a little harder to do without
Right.
kids, I think. But anyway, so that's maybe you could talk. We could. I don't. Would it make sense to go through your different suggestions? So number one is develop a routine in the same physical places. And number two is participate in the drama of the street. So do you want to introduce those? You got to teach a class, Claire, because I think the people out there are really suffering. I think our generation in particular,
Oh.
it seems to me, is the most antisocial generation in human history. And so they need
Yeah.
they need help.
Well, I'll do my best. Okay. So my first one, like you said, was just go find a spot. And to me, that's one of the most important. I think for the reasons I said in my piece, which is that, a lot of people have social anxiety. And I think it might be a generational thing. Like they really struggle with not feeling like an intruder or a moron as soon as they open their mouth to talk to someone. And I think if you just get used to going to the same spot every day, you you can take things at your own pace. You can try things out. You can just put one little foot in front of the other. And you don't have to approach it as like a project. Like today, I'm gonna talk to 5 people and be social. Like if you keep showing up, just keep showing up, the little tiny opportunities will arise to smile at someone or to help clean up a drink that got spilled or something that kind of brings you into contact organically with your fellow man. And I think the other thing about becoming a regular is, like you said, with the great example of the kids, is that it's much easier to make friends with someone over some kind of shared things, external thing, whether it's as momentous as child rearing or as relatively non-momentous as we both really like this space and come here a lot. So the more you have external things in your life that you could share with someone, the more you're going to find sharing opportunities. That's the drama of the street. this is this is me like making a virtue out of my bad habits again because I tend to pop off very quickly and then unpop. So uh I have
You're from
no.
Philadelphia, so it makes sense.
Sometimes you just that's
My
the
wife's
one of the
from
things I
Kentucky, and so when we moved to
okay.
Philadelphia, it was a real difficult
Culture shock.
transition.
So yeah, I always feel like it's funny when I moved out here, I kept wondering why I had like fight or flight response every time I met a new person. And finally I realized like back home, I feel like people they complain about something together, like sport, like the Phillies or SEPTA or something. But here people are like, so what's your story? And I'm like, get away from me. I will kill you.
They're too friendly.
um, yeah, just really lovely people. Not like a it was just interesting to see like how uncomfortable I was just because it was just a different cultural norm. So I can
And
imagine someone moving to Philly would be equally struck by, you
the
know.
Philly thing I always tell people is I once listened to an hour of sports radio in Philadelphia in which caller after caller was like yelling angry about how pissed off they were that Philadelphia fans were unfairly maligned as angry.
Well, they proved it.
They were like, it is just so screwed up that Philadelphia fans are given this reputation of being angry, and everyone was just righteously pissed off that people didn't call Philly fans angry.
I mean, it's a little exaggerated, and they're very supportive too. No one ever talks about that. Like if you show up and you work hard and you show that you care, they're very, very supportive.
Unless your name's
But
Donovan McNabb, and then they, for some reason,
okay,
have a
well,
deep and abiding enmity against you.
yeah, he deserves everything he gets. Anyway, um, um, so I don't know. I've just found that I think I guess one of the good sides of kind of being pretty easily okay with kind of quarreling is that it makes it very obvious that it's actually okay to have some conflict, and it's okay to be in situations with another person in public where you're not actually sure how the situation is going to go or whether you're the good guy or how you're being perceived. All of that is recoverable from, even if you are in the wrong. And I think a lot of this is probably part of the social anxiety thing. People are really afraid of like doing it wrong. Like if they talk to someone, if they talk to a neighbor, they'll I don't know they'll be bothering them, or if they I don't know make some small talk or uh yeah they'll be annoying, they'll be stupid, they'll be something negative, but that's okay. Like you can be annoying. So not everyone's gonna like you. It's not a big deal. You don't have to like them either. And sometimes when you don't like each other, like I told this story, it's actually this happened to me twice in New York. I visited, got into an altercation with the building super, and by the end of it, we were friends. The first time, like he's like, "Hey, do you want to smoke a cigarette?" I was like, "Yeah." Like I'm glad we worked through this. And the second time, he was like, you come look me up whenever you're in the city." And I was like, "Oh, New York is great." I mean, it's terrible, but it's great. Sorry, I'm rambling on about um, my building super history, but I just you can do all kinds of things up to and including getting into a fight with someone, and if you have goodwill and are willing to apologize and keep moving on and kind of work on the problem, you'll get through it. It's fine.
Yeah, I love this advice, and I love this story about the fighting with the super, because it's like I do feel like part of the sterility that like plagues modern life has to do with our idea that like only a very narrow range of behaviors is acceptable, like publicly or privately, and you like we have so much control over our social environment if it's like via texts or tweets or messages, and not even like less and less people do phone calls because that feels like even less in control than like texting back and forth.
Right.
And so there is this sense of like just having control so that you like don't mess up. But it takes away a lot of the like I don't know range of human experience. Like yeah, I mean
Yeah.
growing up I'm from like a working class family in Chicago, and I remember like yeah, just like seeing a lot more outwardly emotional behavior, like just in between people who are like maybe not even that close,
Right.
or just neighbors or whatever. And I don't know, is that is that good? I mean, kind of like, and then sometimes things come to a head and you just need to address them. And that's also like a skill that is necessary for like just being a human, you know, as opposed to like either maybe walking away or just never addressing it and just remaining cold and isolated or something.
Right. Remaining cold. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the next one, we want to go through the list. Engage in small talk.
Well, I was gonna jump ahead actually to
Oh, okay.
there's one
Go
that
ahead.
goes along with this pretty well, which is that if you have a front yard or a porch or something that interacts with the street, like do stuff out there, and so you
Mm.
can there's a positive drama of the street too. It's not just
Yeah.
it's not just
It's
getting
not
into
just me
fights.
getting into altercations.
Yeah, not just altercations with building supervisors, but there's a positive thing where, you're going for a walk and you chat with someone watering the garden, and that we have a wonderful experience of frequently when I go on walks with my daughters around the neighborhood, people give us stuff from their garden.
Mm.
I find it's a great, you just compliment someone's garden, and the
Oh,
next thing you're being handed vegetables and fruit and things. It's never failed me as I was starting to a
Sunflowers.
conversation like, oh, you have a lovely garden. And then it always goes well from there. The other one that whenever I hear a language I don't know, I always ask what language, like, oh, what language are you speaking? It never goes
Mhm.
badly. It's always an interesting conversation. There's a strange like
That's a great one.
idea that you're not supposed to ask people where they're from or like what language they're speaking or whatever. It's become and I think it's actually it's terrible advice to not, this is basically like, don't be curious about strangers is the um and sometimes I'm shocked by the languages, like how the heck did you end up in this little, you know like I heard these ladies speaking Slovenian or Slovak. Anyway, some at the playgrounds, like, oh, that's amazing that we have Slovenians here. Why not?
That's really cool.
So
Yeah,
participating in the drama of the street, there's another way you can do that, which is, be outward focusing. Like you said, just put up a lawn chair and, have a drink in your front yard or whatever, and then chat with the passersby. And it's
yeah,
the positive or friendly drama of the street that way.
mhm.
right. And I think to be clear, most of the like 90 to 95% of the drama of the street is the good drama.
Yes.
And it's just going on all the time. Like take a walk around. Um, you'll just yeah, like you said, yeah, you'll see people in their gardens working and that's such a great idea to just go for a walk and compliment people in their gardens because I feel like yeah, like nothing opens people up as much. Like once if someone is a gardener, they will talk about their garden. They will like
Oh yeah.
you have an immediate sort of bridge to their heart. Yeah, I just think there's like whether you are in your own yard and waiting for passersby, or you are just sort of walking around doing your thing and saying hi to people and just commenting on what you see. Um, I think in a friendly way, I think you're just you're gonna sort of like just create these little doors where things can come through. And you can't really say like, oh, if you do this, this will definitely happen. This definitely won't happen. But there's just more doors in your life if you're walking
I love
around, opening your mouth.
I love that way of putting it because part of what like we're always trying to get across um is like some kind of agency. I don't know for sure if I give you a prescription that if you get chickens, you'll like meet other people with chickens and have like a whole group of chicken friends. But like if you get into something and you're passionate about it, like and you open the door, there is the potential there that's not there if you just have the door shut and say like this is all just broken. And on that point, I have a little goes with engage in small talk, your rule number 3. When I was in Chicago last, Patrick and I went to this little used golf equipment store. Patrick's my husband. And we had just gone to the pawn shop, and like we had extended conversation in both of these stores because they're just like weird stores, you know. And like the pawn shop, you've got like a lot of things you can ask about, and then you learn the history of it. And I never really thought of like there's a type of store you can go into where you like can start talking about weird stuff and like hear the history of this thing. And like there was a Bose radio in there, and I was like, oh man, Bose radios are like in pawn shops now. I thought like this was like the technology, whatever, 20 years ago, and now it's like in a pawn shop. Anyways, and then we went to this golf shop, and the guy had, among everything, all the golf stuff, his own honey for sale. And I was like, oh, what is this? Where is this honey from? He was like, oh, I'm a beekeeper. And then it was like literally 25 minutes of detail on how he beekeeper. And I was like, okay, we need to get out of here. But my dad tried to get into beekeeping, and he lives right near there. And so I was like, let me get your card. Like my dad can ask you, you know, troubleshoot things with you. You're an expert level. And he's like, oh yeah, send him down here. I love sharing. So that kind of like little thing where you just ask one little question. People are dying to talk, feels like.
No, it's true. Yeah. But I love that point about like there being like there definitely are places that are just full of stuff and just like other lives kind of colliding with yours. Or pawn shop's a great one. I love the hardware store. I love just going to the hardware store and being like, all right, here's what I want to do. Am I crazy? What do I need? I want to build a chicken coop, but my landlord's like gonna evict me, maybe if I get chickens. But I just want to build one and see a little quail cup. Like I'll take these like half-cocked stupid schemes constantly. Just like, all right, guys, walk me through it. Is this even possible? Yeah. Is this worth the time?
And then you always end up spending like 80 cents at a hardware store after they spend like an hour describing things to you. They're like, here, take these 2 hinges. It's 80 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Or yeah, I truly love going to. I feel like, I mean, my little schemes to build things have mixed degrees of success, but I feel like refinishing furniture is such a great hobby for this reason. Like you have to go out and get the furniture from yard sales. You meet people. You have to go to the hardware store to pick your finish. Yeah, it's a great thing to do outside in your yard. So this is a small commercial. If you need a hobby, refinishing furniture is gonna take you to good places.
My wife is real involved in our local Buy Nothing group, which the design of the group is that whenever it reaches, I think 1,000 people, it splits and becomes more hyper local. So it's restricted in size, and then it just gets narrower and narrower geographically. And so she's, keeps splitting, getting smaller. So we have access to less good stuff, but it used to be sort of citywide, and now it's just like down to the neighborhood. But it's amazing because when in periods when she's real active on it, I just have all these strange people coming onto my porch. She always leaves things on the porch for them. There's all these strange, and then I get sent on missions, around town to go to people's homes and pick up like we get amazing, like we got a marble rolling pin, and all these people give away really nice things. It's not just junk,
Nice things.
But we've actually like she's met a lot of people just through this. You sort of trade back and forth with someone enough and you get to know people, and because it's real local, it's an interesting I think these things exist all over the place, but it's a pretty ingenious
they do
pretty ingenious thing. But it's always funny like to see the strange people on my porch. And including like there's we have these famous Buy Nothing, like there's a woman in town who's like a retired Sports Illustrated swimsuit model turned kind of hippie mom, very odd character, nice but very odd. Like talking with her, it's like, oh wow, there's, I don't know, some lost years or something. And just, anyway, you get all these strange characters on your porch, but it's nice that there's like a porch is just thinking about your thing about interacting in the street. A porch is a nice thing where it's like the perfect place for, it's a slight bit of intimacy, I guess, but it's a place for interacting with relative strangers. Like, someone inviting
Oh
you
yeah,
onto their porch,
porch is the
very different
best.
from being invited into their living room.
Yes, and yeah, much lower sort of effort for both parties, in a good way. And yeah, I think you can, I mean, you can make some version of a porch. You've got a stoop, if you've got a lawn, if you've got any space, you can, I don't know, I find if you set up some lawn furniture in a pleasing way, um, people will use it. People like my lawn furniture, people I don't know sometimes come by and sit in it. Um, I have, like, so I live in a fourplex, and we all share the lawn, but sometimes people just like passing by will just sit down for a minute, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
But
My neighbors
And
and I, we do when the weather's nice, we do a Sunday evening happy hour where we put out, there's a lane that
oh,
runs through the houses, and everyone brings out folding chairs, and we just hang out.
so
Uh,
nice.
and it's extremely low effort, it's just folding chairs, kind of bring your own drink if you want to. Once in a blue moon, we'll have a potluck in someone's garage. But yeah, very easy. And it was just, I don't remember how it started. Someone proposed it, and then there's sort of one guy who kind of sends out the like, hey, weather's going to be nice on Sunday, happy hour, and people just show up.
Yeah.
uh Extremely easy to put
that's
together.
fun. Very low stakes. And so, okay, on that point, moving from spheres where it's low stakes to slightly higher stakes, invite your neighbors over. Let's run through this bit of advice. When does it become appropriate? We're like relearning all the social norms that were just inherent in our parents' generation.
Yeah. Um, I I think, this is just one lady's 2 cents. I think you can always, like, you don't have to know them. You can just put a note on their door, introduce yourself, say you'd like to get to know them, invite them over. And if they have, give them a way to contact you. And if they, um, and I said in the piece, I think it's really important to invite them over a specific time because it's just so much easier for everyone. And also, if they don't want to, there's no sort of drama. If they don't want to be your friend, they can just say, oh, sorry, can't make it that day. And then if you ask again and the same thing happens, then you'll know, okay, ball's in their court, they'll reach out if they want to.
Mhm.
When I last did this, I had someone say, I can't make it that day, but please keep including me in these invites, which is nice. I find people are more excited to be invited to something than they are cranky about being bothered,
Mm.
in general.
Yep.
I think
And
that's
then two more: join things and go to bars. And join things I won't comment on, but go to bars. Again, it's different here, so I'll just talk about my experience in the US. Last time we visited Chicago, we went to this like super dive bar, and like as soon as we walked in, everybody was like talking to us, like, oh, what do you do? Like, and there was a guy sitting like near the door, but at the bar, but facing the door. And he was like looking at the door. And so as Patrick, my husband, walked in, he like took out his ID and like handed it to him like he was like the bouncer. And he was like, no, what are you doing? Why are you handing me your ID? And it was just like a perfect awkward moment to like just begin the conversation. And the bartender's talking to us. And then after that, we went to this like micro brew place with like exposed whatever, what were you saying, exposed piping and all of this stuff, and it was horrible, and nobody talked to us and said like, don't go to those places. So yeah, let's talk about join things and go to bars. I guess we can start with go to bars since I went there.
Well, it's the fun place to be. Yeah, like I don't mean to hate too much on like microbrews. They're trying to make a good thing like everybody else. But they're just not. I mean, I personally hate industrial sort of aesthetics because they just make it so difficult to talk. They're so loud. But they're just not set up for, that's not what they are. It's not what their sort of role in the ecosystem is. They're for people who really are into beer. They're not people who are just kind of hanging out. And so you're going to get, there are exceptions, but they'll be different. The bars I find really wonderful. Like you were talking about dive bars. I feel like every town has that one bar with like little, neon signs that say, Miller High Life in the window. And they're kind of dark. Sometimes they're kind of gross. If you go there and like, I don't know, like maybe a Friday afternoon, not quite evening, there's always going to be like a bunch of old guys just sitting and yammering. And I feel like if you go, I don't know, just once a week, treat yourself to a little, drink of choice. You'll just you get sort of sucked into these networks of people. And the bar is a good place for talkers. People love talking in bars. They go to bars to talk, at a certain hour in a certain context. I'm a rambler, as you can see, and I love, being in bars and rambling off about some scheme or other brewing in my head. Yeah, I love bars. I think they're so wonderful. I am so glad we are over the 2020, 2021 closures, and they're great. I feel like I should be giving more advice there, but it's pretty simple. I just think they're great places, and if you go once in a while, you're gonna meet people and have a great time. And maybe it's not something people need encouragement. Maybe people already knew that one, but they would have a good time at bars.
And then,
Donald, did you have something? Yeah.
Well, I'm unqualified to talk on the bar question.
Oh yeah.
I don't go to
You don't
bars.
drink, right? Yeah. But what about the
I'm too
join things
puritanical for
question?
that, but
Yeah. Do you have a story to share about the join things
well,
question?
joining things, I am fairly socially inept, but I'm also like have a short memory and I'm fearless, and so it's fine to be socially inept if you just don't, if you're kind of indifferent to the prospect of failure. But I've had pretty good success just starting random things and having people show up to them, or joining things, I guess. Like I had a poetry group here. I just put up some flyers around town and had like a couple random people, and we would just get together in my living room and read poems together. And the only reason the group split up is that one of the main members like moved back east to take care of her parents. But I find it's actually sort of remarkably, like, if you want something to exist, just making a flyer for it and putting it up. I didn't even put up that many.
Yeah.
And there's also a really lovely sort of person who just goes to things regardless what they are. I took a little class recently on knife sharpening, like with whetstones. It was a really interesting class, and the guy who taught it was great. I worked on sharpening my little like a small camping axe. The blade really needed a lot of work. But in any case, there was a lady in the class who didn't seem particularly interested in knife sharpening. I mean, she did everything, but the guy was like, "Oh, nice to see you again." It became clear that she just took every single class that this guy offered, or maybe every single
That's
class
awesome.
offered at this little, it's like this little community eco center place. And this place is neat. It has a garden, and once a month they have a weed and feed event where everyone works on like weeds the garden, and then they make a big like soup or stew from all the stuff in the garden. Everyone just hangs out and eats it. But in any case, this
Cool.
lady just showed up to just joined. She just came to classes. That was her thing, you know. Like my little brother's really into historical tours. He just signs up for like every walking tour that he can possibly find. It's like him
That's so
and the
great.
elderly, you know, pretty much. Architectural tours, historical tours, anything like that. But anyway, that's a great thing to do. And you probably, you know, for those sort of one-off things, you probably won't make a friend, but you know, you start to see the same person at a couple, and you just get to, you know,
Mhm.
like hang out and meet people and learn things. I joined the committee for the local poetry contest. I did that for a year or two. That was my civic involvement.
Mm.
And you know, it was a real funny little group, and I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
joining
that's
things is
great.
good. Starting things is good. The dream now is at some point we want to
It
try to
is.
put together a shape note singing group. My wife and I,
What's
for
that?
some reason, joined a Yiddish
Whoa.
singing group in West Philadelphia. We don't know Yiddish, but we would get together this group of people and sing songs in Yiddish. It was great. We're not good singers, but you know.
That's great.
And actually, you know what it reminds me of a little bit now that you're all saying this is a few of our homeschooling episodes kind of get at this similar theme, which is that a lot of times people who do homeschooling say, you know, my kid's just interested in this thing, and so we like go and see what resources are available in the community, and it's an opportunity to meet people, and it's an opportunity to like have the kid go outside their normal social bubble. And like all of this stuff applies to adults too, like now that you're saying this. And I just feel like sometimes homeschooling is such a transformative experience for parents because they kind of realize all of these resources exist through the lens of trying to educate their kid. And that brings a lot of like that same kind of spontaneity out. But like, yeah, all these resources are kind of out there. And I love your list, Claire, like go to community bulletin boards and libraries, go to rec centers, look at the Craigslist community section, go to Facebook groups. Although we can maybe acknowledge that like some Nextdoor or Facebook groups are just annoying in their own ways, but you could just ignore that
Oh
part.
yeah, a lot of them. They're the community is comprised of annoying people, annoying and lovable people, always. And
Yeah.
My mother-in-law gives us
yeah,
updates about Nextdoor, you know, like the latest from Nextdoor. It seems like a pretty
is that
wild place.
is that the one where people are always like I called 911 because I saw a bug or something? Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like
Yeah.
that's
basically.
the okay.
My mother-in-law also has over the last 6 months started volunteering at the food bank. There's all, you know, I can't recall if you talk about things like that, but there's some, you know, kind of volunteer things like that, which become, you know, she goes every Friday afternoon and like stocks shelves of the food
Mhm.
bank, that you can really get to know people very well pretty quickly
Yeah.
for these routine volunteer, not one-off things, but where you're going and then there's no better way to get to know people than like doing physical labor together. Especially
Yeah.
like you become really close to people. It's like a trick, like coaches know it, you know, you just start off the season doing like hard PT together, and then suddenly everyone is close.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah, I think it's true. Um, yeah, I think like for some reason like a couple years ago I was like, oh, I can still play basketball. I'm allowed to do that. So I called up some people I know. I was like, do you guys want to like play on Friday? Just I don't know, I feel like I put all like the fun all the goods of sports, which like, doing, this isn't physical labor, but doing PT, doing some kind of like strenuous thing together, getting jostled around. I just put that so firmly in my childhood, but I was like, oh, no, you can still do that. You just have to ask people and go to the court. And I'm sure it's more obvious for some people, they're already in pickup basketball leagues or whatever. But for me, it was a rediscovery.
Yeah, that's something similar happened to me recently too. And here in Uruguay, it's very common to have adult leagues. Like the sports clubs, like no sports happen in schools. So the sports clubs are like centers for like social life for a lot of people, and kids have activities there. There's usually like a bar where old guys sit, like people have birthday parties there. There's like after school activities. Anyways,
You
my
crush
husband,
people at handball there.
yeah, so I was just gonna say my husband plays basketball, and a friend of mine, like I'm friends with this like kind of like woo hippie women, and I first like met this group because they started a group called the Luneras, the like women of the moon. We would meet every full moon. It was like
That
very
rules. That's
witchy.
awesome.
And I was like, oh, and they were like, everybody has to wear a long skirt down to the ground. And I was like, oh God, these people. Anyways, they're all like lovely. And then they all got into handball recently, which I've never played in my life. I played volleyball and water polo. It's basically like water polo, but on a court. But the problem is I'm like 5'9" and pretty athletic. Like I haven't played sports in a while, and everybody here is like 5'4" or shorter. And so I'm like afraid. I was telling Donald this already. I'm afraid of hurting people. So I play at like 50%, 30% capacity, because if I like elbow someone and they're like 5'4". Anyways, but it's been fun because like everybody's in it as a beginner. So we're like most of the practices just laughing at how little we know of the rules and how incompetent we are, which is like a fun.
Once or twice a year, you got to go 100% and just crush everyone, and then the
I
rest of
did
the time
that.
go
Yeah,
like
I
dial it
know.
back.
I did that with volleyball. Like there would be certain games where I was like, I just would go completely insane, and then people would be like, "Aren't you doing that all the time?" I don't know. I have a weird thing with sports with that, but yeah, I don't know. I'm like, but anyways, the just being able to go on that routine. There's like twice weekly practices, seeing the ladies, just sweating a little bit, laughing, like, and then you just catch up with people afterwards. Like, what's up with you? This one lady had like a little, like, kind of like, what is it? Multi-level marketing type thing. So she's always bringing her products, that kind of stuff where, but it's good. It's like part of the routine is really lovely. Do we want to get to the other articles?
Well, just one other thing I'd like to toss out there, and then we can talk about the other ones. Is for the last 3 or 4 years I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh yeah.
And we have a great academy here. I do it at I always go to the midday classes, which tend to be smaller. And it's cool because a lot of the guys we see each other there 3 or 4 times a week, 2 to 4 times a week. And it's wrestling, so you're just like literally grappling with each other, and which is something that, and it's all adults. It's something that's very hard to do, and so we're all just trying to learn together, and I'm completely addicted to it now, because it just combines everything. It's like physically really cool and mentally difficult, and I don't know, like fighting is extremely fun, but you don't get punched in the face, so you can just sort of keep doing it. So I highly recommend that. And now it's become popular enough that it sort of exists everywhere, because it was once a kind of niche thing, but we can pretty much go and find a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym almost anywhere. Not that all of them are good. Some of them can be pretty bad, but usually they're at least decent. And it's such a wide mix of guys. It's such a big mix of guys. Some women too, primarily men. At least the classes I go to. But it's like, there's a couple guys who work on ships, like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and then come and train. We have a bunch of firefighters, guys who work at the oil refinery, people with email jobs like me, college students, like older guys. It's a huge range of people, and of sizes of people. And anyway, it's a lot of fun. But that like the physicality of it, it's hard to get to do that anywhere else. Like the drama of the street, you probably shouldn't start physical fights with people. It's harder to come back from. Though there were times in history when
You
that
still
was more
can.
common.
You still
Yeah.
can.
When you wouldn't like, get arrested for assault or whatever. But
You know what? I have to share this story because I just brought it up to my kids. And I just think it's wild. And anyways, it was fun that it happened. So when I went to grad school in Washington State University of Pullman, there's always like frat parties, every weekend, and like roving gangs of frat boys before and after during these parties. And I was leaving a friend's house, other fellow grad students, just like we would always just spend time in each other's apartments or whatever. And I was driving him home, and Patrick and a frat group came and approached our car, and one of the guys jumped on top of the car. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do in this scenario? Because I know that Patrick was drinking, so was the other friend. I'm like, if anyone gets out of this car, it's going to turn into like a physical altercation. So it was a manual, and I was on a hill, but I went in first gear as hard as I could to go fast, just not really fast, like 5 miles an hour enough. And then I hit the brake and it fell off the front. And then he got up like he was going to hit the car. And then I drove away, and I was like, oh my God, averted the fist fight. Thank God he wasn't really hurt. But it was like a total, like, I don't know, movie scenario, but I don't know why that's what
like
me to do in that scenario.
Fast and the Furious.
They were like, oh my God, I can't believe this story. That's insane.
People are really tame now.
Yeah.
Relatively, like, used to be like fist fights at sporting events and rock concerts were very common. Like people would just fight.
Yeah.
But everyone hates Philly fans.
Yeah, I know. Philly fans kept it going later than most places, probably. Like I recently read Richard Rhodes' The Making of the Atomic Bomb, which is an incredible book. But he describes they built this plutonium plant in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Washington. So they had to ship in thousands of construction workers and like build a town for them. And they built all these saloons. And they built the saloons such that they could fire tear gas into them, because like every weekend was basically a riot. Like the guys would just get off work from building roads in the plutonium plant and go to saloons and
hog wild,
fight until they like had to get cleared out with tear gas,
I actually think though there is like a subverted male need to like get into some fights, and so I like your idea, Don, of jujitsu as a way to express that, but also like I like the idea of hockey fights. I think that's great. I kind of love the idea of fans fighting after like a soccer game in England. I don't know. Sometimes it's just necessary to brawl a little bit.
Ashley Colby, soccer hooligan. Okay.
hooligan.
All right, so let's move on to cell phones or cars. You call it, Don.
Well, I like the cell phone story. There's nothing like there's no boring stories about Mexico.
No, it's a great place.
It's a place. Mexicans are incredible, and many things to say about Mexico, but boring is not one of them. So could you just tell us the story? And you can leave a little bit out to entice people to go read it, because it's a great article. But tell us the story. And you're a pretty fearless traveler. Fearless or heedless, I don't know. But tell the story of losing your phone in Mexico.
So I was down for a week in Mexico City, just having a great old time. Made a pilgrimage to the Basilica, staying at this great little, very cheap hotel in Centro Histórico, and I wanted to go to the Plaza Garibaldi because I heard on weekends it's like the mariachi capital of the city. And so I took, I wasn't sure I could figure out the address. I took a taxi, and I was punished, smitten by God for my laziness, taking a taxi because as I got out and as it was like fully driven away, I was walking through the plaza and I reached in my purse for my phone and there was no phone there. I had left it in the taxi. And this is like a fairly trivial problem to have, but it felt like a really big problem at the time. It was like, oh my, okay, so what if I don't get it back, what's my plan B? What do I have to do to get it back? Who do I have to call? What's my plan of action? Um, and it was just this very weird, I was just sitting in the this famous bar, the Salon Tinampa, having a beer, just kind of licking my wounds and just thinking, I was not always like this. It would not always have freaked me out so much that I didn't have a phone anymore. And the essay kind of became a meditation on that, um, on how quickly you forget that you can do things without a phone.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of like very perfect and insulated little kind of bubble you have, all the things you need at your fingertips in a kind of appropriate, convenient way. It's very nice. But I was just kind of like, wow, I've really gotten soft. Um, so I don't know if that's enough of the
Yeah,
teaser for the story or
and I think the one of the takeaways for people younger than us, the younger than me, might not even remember what this is like, but you describe it as a web of dependencies and like the daily ways in which you would be like dependent on the kindness of strangers literally to be able to get through your day. Like, can I borrow your phone? Or do you know directions to X, Y, and Z place? Do you know of a hotel that you could recommend? And there was like this network. I traveled like all around the world with no smartphone in like 2008 to 10. And it was like, you'd go into an internet cafe to look things up and you'd write it down. You'd have like a physical map to get yourself around, like all of those skills. And then on top of it, you'd be like, relying that like on some amount of trust in the world
other
to be able
people.
to get
Yeah.
in other people. And there is something really lost in the convenience of the alternative as it is now.
I used to travel, like I didn't have a cell phone at all until my first kid was born, and now I just have a flip phone. But I have fond memories. I would always like I did a long like I don't know 6 week trip on the West Coast. And I just remember I had a sheet of paper where I wrote down like the phone numbers of people that I had that I knew in various cities. And I had like one or two specific places or times I had to get to, but then most of the in between was just, you know, like choose your own adventure kind of deal.
Right.
And you end up getting interesting. Like I got a ride from San Francisco to Portland from the sister of a friend's roommate who just happened to be moving to Portland the weekend I wanted to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And she drove me the whole way. Um, and I did some hitchhiking. Like I thought hitchhiking out of Eugene, Oregon was going to be really easy because Eugene's kind of hippie, whatever town. But I just was there forever and no one was picking me up. So I decided to walk to the next on ramp. And I was walking along the highway and a truck of guys from Oaxaca pulled over. They gave me a ride, which was great. They really wanted me to eat pork rinds with them. I didn't want to eat pork rinds, but they were very nice. They didn't speak any English. Just serendipity and cool stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, like reviews, like online reviews have now really shaped how people interact with a place. Like I think
Or
that's one of
even
the smart
see
ones
that
thing.
it
It's like, oh, we go
exists.
to a town, like what place has the good reviews? You know, it's like what
Yeah.
as opposed to like you said, asking around.
Yep.
Definitely something to be
Yeah.
lost.
And I feel like I don't know, there's a whole set of things that seem really scary until you have to do them, and then they don't. And I mean, it's nice not having to do them. It's nice having a little bit of money and a phone and be able to say like, oh, if I get stranded, I can afford a hotel. I don't have to like think on my feet about how to fix these problems. But um, I don't know. It's nice occasionally being reminded that like, yes, you can lose these things. You can lose a lot of these things, and you'll still be fine. You can figure it out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I once was trying to get to Syria from Jordan, and if you have gone to Israel and it's stamped on your passport, then Syria won't let you in.
right. You can't get
And
in.
so when I was leaving Egypt to go to Israel, I asked them to stamp like a separate piece of paper, and they understood and they did that. But then the Syrians saw that my exit point was the entry point to Israel, so they assumed that I went to Israel, so I wasn't able to get in. Anyways, so I'm stuck at the Syrian border, and I took a bus there. This was with my boyfriend at the time, and the Syrian family was like going back to Jordan, was coming from Syria to Jordan, and just took me back. And then they like in very broken, like in some French, because they that was the only like romantic language that, or intermediary language they knew. I was like looking stuff up in my book. They asked if I could stay with them, if I wanted to stay with them. So we stayed with them, and I think this is like a devout Muslim family. They're not supposed to
Oh,
drink
that's wonderful.
alcohol. And then this guy pulls out a giant bottle of like, I don't know, some kind of bathtub liquor and pours it like 8 ounces in a cup. Like, and there's like this Muslim hospitality culture, and I'm like, I think there's like and I've always had the rule, like if anyone serves me something, I'm gonna drink it or eat it. Like, but that I was like, thank you, and
Right.
just took like a couple sips. But
Getting
what a
trashed
great
on
story.
prison hooch in
Tiny
Yeah.
sip.
Exactly. I was like, this is not safe, like medically unsafe. Amount of I'm willing to
This is
break my
gonna
rule for
burn
this
my
stuff.
stomach.
Yeah, but it was really sweet, and what a fun story. And I stayed with them for a couple days, and like, got to see their whole like family routine, and yeah, I mean, I think what that would never have happened, I don't think now. I would just probably find some sort of like taxi type system, or go to a hotel, or
Right.
people are really hospitable. Like people
They
love
are.
it's fun, it's exciting to have travelers,
hmm
and to meet strangers and have like that weird 1 or 2 days of intense closeness, and you stay up all night talking, and then it's like, oh, and I'll probably never see this person ever again.
yeah,
I was with some
yeah.
Right.
on that trip. Maybe it was a different trip, and we snuck into the Thousand Oaks Carnival in California, in Thousand Oaks, California. The county fair. Fog Hat was playing. Uh, and and then we met these people there. The one guy was like 7 feet tall, and his friend was really short. And the short guy had a V tattooed on one hand and a gun tattooed on the other, like the most intense vegan tattoo
All right.
ever. And he was really into Dance Dance Revolution, like the dancing video
Yeah,
game.
I
And we ended
remember
up
when that was
staying at
big.
those guys' house, and their whole house was covered in mass market paperback sci-fi novels, you know? Uh and like these guys had never met me in their life, and I'm like sleeping on the floor in their sci-fi novel house, and it was unclear how the two guys even knew each other. Uh but people are really hospitable.
That's
Mhm.
Yeah, they are. And I think especially when they see someone in a jam, like even if they wouldn't want to sort of talk to you or hang out with you, or like even if they have no real like friendly relation to you in normal circumstances. If people see someone in a jam, I feel like from most of them it activates some like very basic, like special mode of relating where all
Mhm.
kinds of normal boundaries can be crossed over in order to help.
Mhm. Um, Related, I guess we could just briefly touch on before we wrap up this article about driving and cars driven apart.
Not driving.
Um, and I feel like this is an under-discussed topic, where I guess you make the argument that, like, in the popular consciousness, especially in the US, there's this idea of like freedom that comes along with cars. But there's also like this fear of car crashes and the danger alongside it. But there's not that much conversation about like the quality of the experience of like walking or biking relative to like speeding by in a car. Um, and I think about, I remember in Ed Abbey's book. Ed Abbey's this writer about the American West, and he wrote about this national park, which was not then a national park, but now is the Arches. He said like the tourists come in and they're just speeding through, like they're just speeding through to see it as quickly as possible. And I remember this line so vividly. It was like, these people need to get out of their cars and crawl on their hands and knees through the desert if they want to see it, and like just keep crawling
Yeah.
until your knees hurt. And I was just like, just thinking about the quality of the things that you can see at different speeds of
Yeah.
like relating to the world, moving through the world.
I think it's true. I think yeah, it's different. You sort of experience things as like a panorama, almost like a it's to me there's something like the experience of being in a car is almost more like going to a movie. Like the outward world like looks like is in a certain way like projected for me. I'm not really in it. I'm separate from it. They're just very qualitatively different, and it can be fun to go super fast and see the panorama of the hills rolling by, but it's not. I don't think it's good if it's your only way of sort of navigating through space.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it kind of comes back around to like the conversation we started with, like about civic life, in some ways, because there's something really closed off about being in a car, and driving through a place, as opposed to even being on a motorcycle. I feel like part of the reason people like motorcycles is you're like out in the world more, able to interact with it. But even more so walking, like Donald was describing, like walking around and talking to neighbors and commenting on their gardens. Not going to happen with, if you're driving by in a car, you're shouting to them from the street.
There's amazing things that can happen when you go. This is going back to our initial conversation, but it just occurred to me. Like uh I work 4 days a week, and then on Friday my wife works and I'm with the girls, and we have a rough routine where if the weather's nice, we go to the park, and if the weather's bad, we go to the children's museum. But it used to be every Friday at the park, we got to know this pair of these grandparents who would always bring their kids. We would just see them every Friday, and we got to know them. And then it turns out that the grandfather is the Greek chanter at the Orthodox Church in town where we now go. And they lived like 3 blocks away from us. And now, like, anyway, it just all these amazing connections to them, which we had no idea about when we got to know them. Um, we would just see them on Fridays, and like my kids would play with their grandkids.
Wonderful.
And it was so I live in a small enough place where that sort of thing is possible, but I feel like even in big places, if you have the recurring thing, you'll meet people who are proximate to it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I yeah, I think that it's just a charming. I don't know. I love hearing these little like charming vignettes of other people's lives because it just the variety of how these kinds of blossoming networks and love of where you live, the different forms they take. I don't know. It's very beautiful to me. There are as many ways for it to go as there are people in the world.
I love that. Anything else, I don't know, you feel like expressing that comes up as we kind of like reflect back on this conversation? I've really enjoyed this because we've got to tell a lot of stories, and I feel like the stories are just really compelling. Like it's good to couch the stories in the theory, but I feel like Doomer optimism would be helpful to move more in the direction of stories. I feel like they really illustrate, they're so fun, like they really illustrate the joy of like what you're trying to get across. But so anything else you want to like we haven't touched on, I feel like kind of like hangs this philosophy together that is being represented by these three articles.
Oh, that's a great question. Think I think I often see this sense online and often from I think very young people who are struggling with um all the petty humiliations of finding a job and living in a terrible apartment with a terrible floor chosen by your landlord and all these things in life that are just a real kick in the nards. But there's this like sense like only what is legibly, what is like visible to others and important is worthwhile. Only building a legacy or greatness or having it all, like I think there's like masculine and feminine coded versions of this. Having this grammable life or being, just I don't know, just this sort of seething need for something to validate that your life is worthwhile. And to me, I think life is so wonderful. It even when it's really bad and really hard, I think things that are not really important, that don't really ever get noticed by anyone else or show up or have anything they really are working towards are just so worthwhile. And I want people, especially that I see sort of getting more and more sucked into the cattle chute of online life, just to not be afraid of life. Not be afraid of. I think this is partially just from growing up in a big family where everything is constantly collapsing around you. It's not. It is not like it is not sedate or pretty most of the time. But it is just
Full.
so yeah. It's just the best thing that ever happened to me. And I feel like that on a sort of larger scale is what I hope my relation to the cosmos is. And yeah, I guess don't just not being afraid of life. And also if you see something worth doing, do it. No one's gonna give you permission to live a good life. No one's gonna like say, oh, here's how you can have your 401k and everything be perfect and nothing threatened. And also you get to have all these adventures and like you have to pick, like choose what you want. If it's having that 401k so you can support your family, that's good, that's worthwhile. You know, if it's blowing up your life and moving back to your hometown or something, then do that. But don't wait for permission from somebody. Oh, sorry. That's
No, I love that. I
Your
love that
fault.
so much. No, while I was reading this article, I was thinking there's this like little children's library that we have in our community, and I don't go every week. I should go every week. I should just go every week, and I should make it part of my routine. So I'm gonna do that, inspired by your writing and this conversation.
Thank
Just
you.
kind of like be forced into these little
Makes me
routines
happy.
too, like just to force yourself, just go and do it. It's easier to sit at home and just like, you know, and I don't know, just spend time only with the family, but it's good to get outside of your bubble and like have those interactions regularly built into your schedule too. So thank you so much. This was lovely. Anything else, Don, from you?
I think this is a good way to close. Thanks, Claire.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Guys. Really good
All
meeting
right.
you. See you again.